Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're talking about the Interdictor Combat Refit. It is not a popular ship, right? Possibly the worst ship ever. We're talking about Star Wars Armada's worst ship. It's the Interdictor Combat Refit, a ship often speculated and baffled over. Even attempting, homebrew groups have tried to rebalance it, tried to points adjust it, and it's still, at the end of the day, not a popular ship. So we're going to kind of look at some ways that I might think it might be better. I'd love to hear what you guys think on ways to fix it or to make it more desirable. And even if we can't fix the combat interdictor, can we still use it and have fun with it? We'll also look at a list at the end of the video where we can I show you some ways of maybe making it fun and having fun with it. Despite it being the worst ship, it's still the worst ship in the best game, which is still a pretty cool thing. So, also, we're doing a new round of the giveaway right now for a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my other videos. Let me know how you would fix the Interdictor Combat Refit. So, talking about the Interdictor Combat Refit, this is a 93-point ship, initially costed at 93 points, which it makes it a little hard to field considering that it only has the one experimental retrofit. The Interdictor is the only type of ship in Star Wars Armada that features the experimental retrofit. Its sister ship, the Suppression Refit, comes in at only 90 points, 3 points cheaper, and has an additional experimental retrofit, which basically, in layman's terms, means you take the Interdictor for the experimental retrofit. That's 98% of the reason you take an Interdictor. I won't say 100% because it is also the only ship with 5 engineering. So there's some other reasons to take it, and it's a medium ship with 9 hull. 9 hull and 5 engineering is kind of cool, but primarily you take it for the experimental retrofit, which are very powerful upgrades that are only available to this ship or one of these two variants. So why is the combat refit more expensive? Well, a couple of reasons. This is an early ship, early in the days of Star Wars Armada. This was part of Wave 4, which came out along with Wave 3, which meant it was really in the second big release that we got. Armada had a core set, then they had kind of a Wave 1, and then they had a kind of a Wave 2 not too long after that. But all of that was kind of spoiled at the beginning. Then there was about a year drought while the Super Star Destroyer was kind of in limbo, and we had a huge break without content. And then finally we got Waves 3 and Wave 4, which ended up coming out, I think, on the same day. It was a very weird time for Armada. But it was still very early in the lifespan of Armada, and certain things I think were overvalued. One of those things that was overvalued was the extra red defense die, or I'm sorry, the extra red attack die in the arc. So swapping out a blue for a red meant that the combat refit could fire a little bit more reliably and more consistently, having extra doses of reliable long-range firepower, which, I mean, it's not a terrible thing, but in the kind of world that we're in right now, 2 red dice doesn't mean very much, isn't going to do a whole lot of good. So it also has an extra flak, which is nice. A blue and a black for anti-squadron is a decent thing. I'm not shaking a stick at that at all. Usually, however, though, the squadrons will go for other ships that are more critical to you winning the game, and the interdictors usually are more critical at their role during the game's initial setup, and usually less critical towards you doing damage and winning the game kind of midway through. So ends up not being super strong from that regards. And the fact that it's in most ways seen as a downgrade over the suppression refit, it kind of is surprising that it ends up being more expensive, which has led a lot of people to say, well, this should just be cheaper than the suppression refit. And while that may certainly be true, it's not always, enough to flip the script and make you want to field this ship in the first place. Another reason that the suppression refit is a little bit superior is because of the fact, well, this is a ship that has an ion cannon slot. Since this has come out, we've gotten much better ion cannon upgrades. And it has an offensive retrofit, which means you can put disposable capacitors on this ship, which means It can shoot 3 blue dice at long range and has a much better chance of actually making those blue critical effects that you might equip onto it work. So as far as being a 2-trick pony, the Interdictor suppression refit is much better at that because it's got the trick of making the long range special crits happen, far more likely to happen on the suppression refit, and the trick of using experimental retrofits to move objectives around or slow ships down or do other weird things or give rerolls to other ships that are closing the gap. All of that stuff you get. This is better at also. So the suppression refit is better at just about everything, with the exception of the double anti-squadron, which again, if you want to bring a flak boat, there's probably better flak ships to bring. And then the 2 red. However, there's not really a whole lot of cases that really kind of make you want 2 red. It's not bad. There's some cases where it's preferable, but usually if you're going to build this ship to have firepower, you're going to use the ion cannon slot and figure in some kind of blue critical effect. And again, in that case, you have less chances of getting that blue critical effect on a ship that has less blue dice. So again, it just doesn't really work with itself. It almost is counterproductive. So that's my take on the Interdictor combat refit. Now, there's definitely ways to fix it. One of them, of course, is a points reduction. Well, from what we've seen so far from different community efforts to rebalance this thing, it hasn't been enough. And while I'm not poo-pooing the idea of a points reduction, I just don't think it's enough. So I'm going to bring in some alternate things. For one, I think one simple way to, and I'd like the idea of changing it as little as possible rather than completely redesigning the ship. One way would be to simply give it that second experimental retrofit. Now all of a sudden, the advantage is more subtle between the two. Now that might not be enough, but it might, suddenly let that second flak shine just a little bit more. And those opportunities where having 2 red and multiple arcs and being able to double arc somebody at long range with 2 red here and 2 red in the side, suddenly, maybe there's case for that. Maybe with Ramadi and stuff like that. Maybe there's cases where this would shine a little bit better if you were able to actually just have 2 experimental retrofits on it. So that's an option. But since it's a refit, we could also look at, say, okay, since it lost an upgrade slot, and is more expensive, maybe that upgrade slot should have been changed to something else. Whether a turbo laser sounds like it's probably more of a realistic option. Turbo laser could definitely be an option. Defensive retrofit, perhaps. Defensive retrofit on a 9-hull 5 engineering ship might be really strong. Could factor into the combat refit. Combat doesn't always have to mean offense. Combat could mean defense. Could mean that this thing can now storm the front line and survive that much longer. It's something to think about. Maybe so a replacement slot effect, so it has the same number of upgrade slots at least, or even a double officer. Of course, that doesn't really thematically fit with a combat refit, really, because all they did with it for combat is they removed experimental retrofit and gave it 1 extra flak die. It's not even really reflective of what's in the picture. It looks like it's throwing black dice on a close range ship attack, and it does not have black dice. Although black dice is another option that would potentially be really cool. It has black in the flak, but not black on the ship, which is an interesting thing, right? Wouldn't it? Or maybe an ordnance. Maybe ordnance on this thing has no black dice, but all of a sudden, hey, you could put a little. Maybe if you do get in the black dice range, maybe you could have something there. There's a few things that would work. It's interesting. It's something to think about. Of course, maybe more of a points reduction. Of course, if you go too low, then it just becomes a ship that's, if you do more than 10 points of a reduction, that maybe that's too much, because you still do have a high hull ship with a lot of engineering that can also take its support team and feed shields to other ships and stuff like that. And I think that is one of the things that is worth thinking about, and one of the aspects we're going to consider when we do build a fleet with this one. And a couple of other things. Maybe change some of its defense tokens. We have salvo now. Maybe drop one of those contains and swap that for a salvo. And you don't often see an alternate version of a ship that has different defense tokens. But what if the combat refit had a salvo that would fit the theme of it being combat? It's a thought. What if you called it a Interdictor Star Destroyer? Although if you're going to go that far, maybe just make an all-new ship. I don't know. But if it were a Star Destroyer, now suddenly it could take 7th Fleet and possibly have something. Because again, the Interdictors was one of those ships that didn't have a lot of titles, just had the one. So again, new titles is also another way to do it. If there was a title that was sort of manufactured to be in favor of the combat refit, like when attacking, if you have at long range and you have exactly 2 hit results, do something weird or whatever. I mean, I played around with things like that when I was doing that, like an early Nunchuck homebrew expansion I did years and years ago. Another option is simply to increase the shields. What if it had a little bit higher shield values? Even one more in the front or one more on each of the sides might help it. Might help it stand out a little bit more. Might make it more combat ready to go into the front, because the shields aren't super heavy. They're not super heavy, and it's there's a lot of different ways that you can skin this cat, so to speak, to try to make the Interdictor combat refit a little bit better beyond just a points reduction. Because again, if you're taking the Interdictor, if you're not taking a victory, you're taking the Interdictor, usually you're taking it for purposes of the experimental retrofit. So again, if you're going to make me choose this ship over the suppression refit, I think it needs to be more than just points. I think this one has to have a little more than what it has. So those are some ideas. But let's go ahead and let's talk about a list that's using these. So in this list, I only had enough points for 2 experimental retrofits, and that happened to work here. Now, my thought is take the Interdictor, not really because of the experimental retrofits. I started out building a list that wasn't going to run any at all, and I said, you know what, let's just have fun with it. Let's factor what strengths the ship has on its own. I experimented with Ramadi. I ended up not using Ramadi, but that definitely was an option. But Projection Experts is a good role for an Interdictor. Again, granted, everything that this ship can do, technically, Suppression Refit could do also. So let's keep that in mind. This isn't a super serious list. This is a list to try to to show up and have a little fun with. So that's the idea of it being a strong ship. So we put Mahdi on here. Again, 9 hull on this ship with it's going to go up to 11, and then we've got Projection Experts already. I think I said Projection Experts. That's kind of funny. I like that. Experts, projection experts. Hashtag projexperts. All right. But no, this does make the ship able to feed into the ISD. We put ECM on the ISD, Palpatine on the ISD, so people are shooting at it. They get get punished a little bit. We want the ISD to be able to shoot kind of hard. So we gunnery teams, XI7s. It can go out there twice. We don't have dice fixing on this one though. Just got to roll right. Again, this is supposed to be a fun list. We roll fun when you happen to get a really good hit without any dice fixing. Again, we're going for fun for this one. But yeah, 2 of the Interdictor combat refits. We've got the Grav Shift reroute, and then we've got the Gravwell Projector. These are the 2 that kind of only matter at the start of the game. But they're fun. They can also influence the objectives. I'm not talking about the objectives in here because I'm probably going to go with some kind of gravity rift, objectives, so I can move that around. And then we got a Gazanti with CommsNet also. So not only can we really try to keep that ISD2 alive and shielded, we can toss it extra engineering tokens. We can have these guys do engineering, feeding shields over to the ISD. If they start shooting the Interdictor, no problem. I mean, it's, I think ideally you'd fly the ISD2 right up front with these guys kind of along the sides. It would have been nice if I could have put, given them speed 3, but I need Projection Experts on there. I need them to do something. And if they're a little bit farther back, maybe those red dice will get more opportunities to fire. If something is obstructed, okay, I'll have more opportunities to fire. Yes, a suppression refit could have taken disposable capacitors and still thrown blue dice at long range. I mean, technically this ship could too also. But that's only for 1 round. And if we're keeping these two kind of behind the ISD, they may have multiple rounds of firing at long range. It's possible. And if that happens, then this could be one of those cases where I get more firepower and actually get more results out of a combat refit than over a suppression refit. It's possible in a list like this. That depends on how I fly it, and also depends on how my opponent flies their lists. And if they do come at us with a squadron heavy, because again, this is a no squadron build, we have lots of flak. The ISD has 2 blue. We've got blue-black here, blue-black there. We've got a lot of flak. So if we can position these things accordingly, and again, if I'm going up against heavy squadrons, I'm going to probably lock that ISD at speed 2 and try to run these guys all in one giant formation or something like that. We'll see if that works. I'm not sure that it'll work like that, but that would be pretty cool. It's got potential. It's definitely got potential. At least potential for fun. Because I promise you this, your opponent has probably never faced 2 combat interdictors before. Not in the same list. Maybe. Let me know if you've seen something like this. It could be interesting. It could be interesting. All right, that's my thoughts on maybe the worst ship in the game, maybe the worst ship of all time, the Interdictor combat refit for Star Wars Armada. Love to hear your thoughts on it. How would you make it better? And do you want to have some fun with a list like this? I'll put a link in the description below so you can take a look at this completely crazy fun list, and that'll do it. All right, I'm gonna thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all, and always wash your socks.